Thank you for invitation. I would like to show how the social mechanism influenced the testimonies, and I stress on the discourse on the rightness in Poland. I have the chapters with titles, so I tell the title and then the content. Paradoxes of memory. For a cultural historian, the Polish memory of the rightness conceals two paradoxes. Felix Stych wrote, "Those who saved Jews were only a fraction of the Polish society, its noble minority who had to watch out carefully not only to Germans, but also for their fellow countrymen. After the war, the rightness preferred not to brag about their own heroism, and if their actions were revealed, they were often cast by other Poles. Although people who saved Jews acted against the norms adopted by the majority, in the collective phantasm and imagination, they are the embodiment of the community and its values. In the dominant narrative, the Polish war over Jews disappears into the background. The rightness, who were often treated as national traitors and had to oppose the practices and beliefs of the majority, move into the center and become the symbol of the attitude of the entire Polish collective. Publications on saving Jews often assume the form of the anthology of examples or a portrait gallery. They become a family group photo. This is the history of ourselves, says Poles, the essence of what is Polish. The second paradox is related to the way of speaking about the rightness. Jan Błoński was surprised to find the protest by Zofia Kocak-Szczucka, a record of awareness and also a founding text for the Polish thought of saving Jews, as, I quote, very pro-Jewish and at the same time bluntly anti-Semitic. Błoński's remark failed to trigger an analysis in Poland. The question what this peculiar combination actually means remained unanswered, and so I would like to try to answer that question. The need for the rightness structure. The topic of the rightness usually emerges at the time of outbreaks of revival of anti-Semitism. After the Kielce pogrom in 1946, during the political crisis of March 1968, or in post-communist times in a reaction to the books of Jan Tomasz Gross that dealt with the anti-Semitic uses in Poland. Let us listen. 2 weeks after the Kielce pogrom, an editor's note was published on the front page of the weekly Tygodnik Powszechny. Tygodnik Powszechny is a weekly newspaper which is considered a liberal one, and liberal, open, so on. The authors mentioned 41 killed, but almost entire text focuses on the gist of Polishness. I quote, "The Polish nation brought up in the spirit of the Christian morality." We find out, quotation, the effects of intolerance and occasional riots were an exception in Poland and never spread to the broader cycles of the society. The rightness are to serve as a proof thereof. During the last war, very many Poles, risking their own lives, helped Jews and protected them at the time of the most terrible extermination of this nation by Germans. Undoubtedly, were it not for this help, hardly any Jew in this country would have survived. An astonishing reaction. Tygodnik's editors unmistakably condemn violence, but at the same time create an impression of Polish superiority. They are not interested in the situation of the victims. They do not focus on the atrocity and the cultural reasons for it, but on how it influences the image of the Polish society in its own eyes and in the eyes of the world. Conclusions from this peculiar reasoning are such that despite the Kielce pogrom, these are Jews that are in debt to Poland, Catholicism, and the Polish society. The Polish reader, although terrified by the pogrom, can sleep peacefully. Nothing bad is going on in his community. Quotation, "In the traditions of Polish nation, there was never any racist or religious persecution, Tygodnik writes. Still, Jews had reasons to be afraid. Immediately after the war, many perished in Poland on the trains and roads, returning to homes they had abandoned. In 1945, pogroms in Krakow and Rzeszów took place. A strike spontaneously was held to defend those who participated in the Kielce pogrom. Andrzej Żukowski wrote, quotation, "The purging of Poland and Jews through forced emigration, planned since the late 30s by the nationalist circles and redefined by the end of occupation as an ethnic cleansing project, was nearly fully realized." Jews were aware of the aversion towards them and of the real risk. A statement that they owe their lives to Paul, even though they actually owe their life to someone who had hidden them from their own neighbors, had to be interpreted as a threat, especially as Tygodnik's editors could not hold back a reproof. It is clear that such a provoked action, they write of a pogrom, although it does not make it any less atrocious, is an isolated and exceptional phenomenon, and then, thus, one must not generalize too hastily and arbitrarily. After such words, the saving and the saved were bound to realize that, while speaking about their experience, they have to choose carefully every word uttered about the Polish majority. A hostile plot against us. In Zofia Kossak-Szczucka, The Protest, published in the early August 1942, a founding text for the Polish thought on saving Jews, the motive of slandering Poland by those perishing appears twice. Quotation, "Our feelings regarding Jews have not changed. We still believe them to be Poland's political, economic and ideological enemies. Moreover, we realize that they hate us more than they do Germans and hold us responsible for the misfortune they experience." And then, "In the stubborn silence of the international Jewry, in the efforts of the German propaganda trying to already shift the odium resulting from the massacre of the Jews to Lithuanians and Poles, we sense a planning of a hostile plot against us." The protest by Kossak-Szczucka is taught as appeal to help the Jews. It's important remark. Holding us responsible for their misery, translating it into the language of reality, openly speaking about the anti-Semitism which the exterminated were facing and depicted it as a problem of the Polish culture, turns out to constitute the axis of the anti-Semitic phantasm present in Kossak-Szczucka text. It is speaking of the Polish responsibility and guilt that proves that Jews hate us more than they do Germans. Kossak-Szczucka goes as far as to suggest a parallel between the Nazis' hostile action against Poland and those of the international Jewry, whose stubborn silence, combined with the efforts of the German propaganda, turns out to be a planning of the hostile plot against us. Speaking of saving Jews combined with accusing them of slandering Poland outlined the war and has not been uncommon until the present day. In the already cited text published in the Tygodnik Powszechny in 1946, immediately after the Kielce pogrom, we read, "Some people will undoubtedly try to assign the responsibility for this atrocity to broader cycles of our society. Other texts and letters published later in Tygodnik indicate that this concern regards above all the Polish Jews." Even Władysław Bartoszewski is an icon of helping Jews, one of the Żegota organization which during the war tried to help the Jews in Poland. In 1963 he called for sending reminiscences about the experiences related to the various forms of help provided to Jews by Poles during the occupation. And his notes start from the same motive. I quote, "In the past few years we witnessed some unjust statements and publication in the West. Now and then even a tendency was voiced assigning partial responsibility for the fate of Jews in Poland to the Polish society, not a new tendency as it had been reflected in specific actions of the Nazi propaganda. 5 years later, in March 1968, a real festival of hatred broke out in which the narrative about saving Jews played a considerable role. The topos of slander and Jewish ungratefulness became the axis of the anti-Semitic narrative of the followers of ultranationalist communist politician Moczar. The motive returns also today, for example, in the action Life for Life, held by the Institute of National Remembrance and the National Center for Culture. In the supplement to the daily Rzeczpospolita, the front page editorial raises the issue of the unfair opinions on Poland. I quote, "The ignorance of the influential circles in the West inclined to use the stereotypes of anti-Semitic Poles, Polish death camps, the joint responsibility with the Nazi for murdering Jews." The text is accompanied by the photograph of the Kowalski family with a caption. I quote, "Burned alive on December the 6th, 1942 in Ciepielów by Waffen-SS forces for hiding Jews." Two Polish directors made a documentary under the title "The Story of the Kowalski Family." It was very famous in Poland. In the premiere there was present the First Lady and so on. It was 2009, and the movie, with an extended and impressive scene of the burning barn, is, similarly to the supplement to the Daily Rzeczpospolita, a contemporary version of the story of the hostile plot. Viewers are well aware that the ungrateful Jew who slandered Poland is Jan Tomasz Gross with his account of Jedwabne massacre and the image of the burning barn. Excluding through saving. The story of rightness incorporates Jews in the Polish social community only in order to immediately exclude them. The mechanism is almost ripe in the Zofia Kosak-Szczucka, the protest. The text rouses compassion for the suffering and the sense of Christian duty, and still, setting the highest moral obligation to Polish Catholics, Kosak-Szczucka creates a contrast between the dominant majority and the minority discriminated against. The worse the Jew turns out to be, the better and the more admirable the Pole is. The Polish Catholic and the national spirit is shining against the background of the hostile plot against us. Helping the enemy is a sign of superiority and the moral victory over Jews, and the readily recalled examples of the rightness are the chief proof thereof. Another chapter, "They wouldn't have done that for us." On the memorial to the rightness built a few years ago in Kielce, there are two plates. On the left one, there is an inscription, "In the memory of Poles murdered by Germans in 1949-1945 for helping Jews and saving them from the Shoah." On the right, a poem by a Jewish author. I hear this title and it makes me think about the people who saved me. I ask and ask, "Oh my dear God, could I have done the same thing?" And the signature is Chaim Heffer. This is the beginning of the 21st century. Let us go back 60 years. After the Kielce pogrom, Stefania Skwarczyńska addressed Jews in Tygodnik Powszechny as follows. "Stating the truth becomes an obligation, but whose? I think that not of those who back then were giving their life for the life of their brothers second after second. But it is the brothers' obligation. I know it is difficult. Tell yourselves what we once did in face of the calamity that threatened you. It needs to be done. In a moment of civil courage, reply the debt to our soldierly courage, blind to the risk of death." Stefania Skwarczyńska is considered one of the most important intellectuals in Poland and has an enormous moral authority and so on. In the narrative of the rightness, Jews turn out to be fundamentally worse than the Polish community. Not only do they slander Poland despite the fact that they owe virtually everything to Poles because they survived solely thanks to Poles. Skwarczyńska calls on them to deliver a heroic gesture, but everybody knows that such gesture is not for them. They are not capable of that as a group. They were given something which they cannot reciprocate, because in the belief of the dominant majority, they are unable to respond with the same. A test in submission. Stefania Skwarczyńska drew conclusions from these notions. Jews are to demonstrate self-criticism. Thus, they are called upon to testify. They should state the truth about Poles and their selfless heroism. And indeed, 4 weeks later, in the columned letters to the editor, Laura Kaufman speaks in an apologetic and thankful manner. I quote, "I feel grateful not only towards those who helped me directly, but towards the Polish society, to Poland. And I fear that the passionate cries and malicious whispering may drown out calm and just voices. That is why the Kielce murders is doubly painful to me. It is the monstrosity of this act that hurts, but also the unfair propaganda nauseous for Poland." The term unfair propaganda apparently applies to accounts of Jews who had decided to speak of what they experienced in Poland, of their thoughts and feelings in connection with these occurrences. The author distances herself from them. And yet, sensitive to the voices of that time, the text a fear of the Polish majority in Kaufman's reaction. This scheme will keep re-emerging. For example, below Bartoszewski appeal, editors place the following excerpt from the Adolf Rudnicki, Polish Jewish writer, and the text was published 2 years earlier. "A few years ago, I confessed that I hold to be my what I hold to be my main sin, that I failed to provide a positive character of a Pole connected with the ghetto, despite the fact I knew such people." So we have the main motive. In 1968, abounds in such declarations which at the same time extol Poland and Poles. The most famous thereof is a series of articles by Adam Żukowski, who at the time was headed the Jewish Historical Institute, and the articles was published in the weekly Polityka in April and May 1968, so the worst months of the anti-Semitic campaign. One of them appeared under the meaningful title, "I would have to thank whole municipalities." Rutkowski, just as other before and after him, realized that he had to do what was expected of him by the dominant majority. Otherwise, there would be no place for him in Poland, while the future of the institution he was heading would become threatened. Every one of those called upon to testify knew what happened, what they and their relatives went through, provided they survived. But self-criticism meant they had to play the role of the supplicant asking for forgiveness for themselves and all ungrateful Jews. Praise the dominant majority and pretend that experience non-violence. It was humiliating. What is more, this ritual was to go on endlessly. A Jew who pleaded with the majority was trying to pay a debt whose nature in the dominant narrative consisted in the inability to be paid. And the conclusion over the memorial to Poles saving Jews, in which there is a white eagle, so the symbol of Polish state. A note on the website of the neighboring Dialogue Center reads that the eagle, I quote, "spreads its wings protectively over the Star of David." Does it really? Thank you.